Have you ever wondered what causes the bone-chilling cold of winter? It's not just the tilt of the Earth or the absence of the sun's warmth. There's another force at play here, an invisible swirling beast that dominates our poles, the polar vortex. This isn't just a meteorological phenomenon, it's a colossal atmospheric gyre, a vast area of low pressure that circles the polar regions. During winter, this vortex can expand, sending cold air cascading down into lower latitudes. It's like a massive, frigid breath exhaled by the Earth itself. The polar vortex is not just a whimsical dance of icy winds, it's a force that greatly impacts our lives, especially during the winter months. It influences our climate, our weather, our daily routines, and even our health. So what exactly is this phenomenon and how does it work? Dive in with us as we unravel the mysteries of the polar vortex. The polar vortex is not born out of the blue. It has a fascinating origin. Our story begins with the Earth's rotation. Imagine Earth spinning on its axis, just like a top. This rotation generates a force known as the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect is responsible for the direction of wind and ocean currents, causing them to move clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere. Now let's introduce the second character in our story, temperature. The Earth doesn't heat evenly. At the equator, where the sun's rays are the most direct, it's warmer. Meanwhile, the poles, which receive less sunlight, are colder. This difference in temperature between the equator and the poles creates a pressure gradient. The warm air at the equator rises and moves towards the poles, while the cold air at the poles sinks and moves towards the equator. However, the Coriolis effect steps in and deflects these winds to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. This deflection creates a swirling pattern of winds, which we know as the polar vortex. The polar vortex isn't a single entity, but comprises two main components: the stratospheric polar vortex, residing high up in the stratosphere, and the tropospheric polar vortex, closer to the Earth's surface. Each plays a crucial role in the weather conditions we experience. These vortexes are strongest during winter, when the temperature difference between the equator and the poles is the greatest. As the cold air from the poles rushes towards the warm equator, it gets deflected by the Coriolis effect, strengthening the winds within the vortex. Therefore, the polar vortex is not a random occurrence. It's a dynamic, intricate system shaped by the Earth's rotation and temperature differences. It's a reflection of the Earth's unique characteristics, a testament to the beauty and complexity of our planet's weather patterns. So, the polar vortex is a product of our planet's unique characteristics. Once formed, the polar vortex doesn't just sit idle, it starts to move. Picture a colossal whirlpool of icy air swirling above the North Pole, its icy tendrils reaching out and touching the areas below. This is the polar vortex in action. As the polar vortex moves, it can bring extremely cold temperatures to those regions it touches. But how does it move? The polar vortex isn't like a wandering traveler, randomly choosing its path. No, it's driven by atmospheric pressure and temperature differences between the pole and the equator. Now, let's delve into something quite intriguing: stratospheric warming events, a phenomenon that can disrupt the polar vortex. Here's what happens. The stratosphere, the layer of the atmosphere where the polar vortex resides, can sometimes experience a rapid rise in temperature. This is caused by the absorption of sunlight by ozone molecules or the compression of air masses. This sudden warming can cause the polar vortex to wobble, to shift, or even to split into multiple vortices. When the polar vortex is stable, it keeps the coldest air confined to the polar regions. But when it's disrupted by a stratospheric warming event, the vortex weakens, and it can no longer hold the cold air in place. Like a broken container spilling its contents, the vortex releases the cold air, which then descends towards lower latitudes. And when that happens, you can expect a serious chill. We're talking about temperatures plummeting, icy winds howling, and snowfall increasing. It's like Mother Nature flipping a switch and plunging us into the depths of winter. But here's the thing to remember: about the polar vortex. It's not a villain out to freeze the world. It's a part of our planet's complex climate system, a piece of the intricate puzzle that makes up our Earth's weather. So, the polar vortex is not just a static entity, it's dynamic and ever-changing. It's a swirling dance of icy air that's constantly shaped and reshaped by the forces of our atmosphere, and that, in itself, is a marvel to behold. The polar vortex affects more than just the weather. Indeed, it's a colossal force that leaves a significant imprint on life as we know it. Its icy tendrils reach out far and wide, touching every aspect of life, from the smallest organisms to the most expansive human activities. Let's start with wildlife. The polar vortex's intense cold can be a severe trial for animals. For example, birds that do not migrate may struggle to find food as the ground freezes solid. Even those that burrow underground may find the earth too stiff to penetrate. Marine life also feels the chill, with some species of fish and other aquatic creatures experiencing disruptions to their life cycles due to the icy waters. Now let's turn to agriculture. The polar vortex can cause significant damage to crops. Imagine a farmer's dismay as they look over a field of wheat, once golden and promising, now frozen and lifeless. The cold can kill off crops in a flash, leading to potential food shortages and economic distress. And what about us, humans? The polar vortex affects our activities in countless ways. It can disrupt transportation with icy roads and blizzards, causing accidents and delays. It can lead to school closures, leaving parents scrambling for childcare. It can even impact our health. Ever heard of frostbite or hypothermia? These are real, serious conditions that can occur when the temperature plummets. Let's not forget about our energy needs. As the cold intensifies, so does our reliance on heating. This can put a strain on electricity grids, leading to potential blackouts. Ever tried to survive a polar vortex without heat? Let's just say it's not a pleasant experience. The polar vortex is not just a cool weather phenomenon, it's a powerful force with the ability to disrupt life as we know it. It's a reminder of nature's might and our place within it. The polar vortex is indeed a formidable force of nature. As our planet changes, so does the polar vortex. The polar vortex, that swirling mass of frigid air high above the Arctic, is not immune to the impacts of climate change. As our world warms, scientists are working tirelessly to predict how the vortex might react and the potential consequences for our weather patterns. One theory proposed by climate scientists suggests that as the Arctic warms faster than the rest of the world, a phenomenon known as Arctic amplification, the temperature difference between the Arctic and the mid-latitudes decreases. This temperature contrast is what drives the winds of the polar vortex. As this contrast lessens, the vortex becomes weaker and wobblier, allowing it to dip down more frequently and bring cold air into areas that are not used to such low temperatures. Another hypothesis suggests that the melting of the Arctic ice could lead to an increase in snowfall over Siberia. This additional snow could amplify waves in the upper atmosphere, distorting the vortex and causing frigid air to spill into the mid-latitudes. However, it's not all doom and gloom. Some scientists believe that a weaker vortex could mean milder winters for certain regions, but it's also important to remember that a weaker vortex doesn't necessarily mean less severe winter weather. In fact, it could result in more intense and unpredictable winter storms. It's clear that the polar vortex is a complex system, influenced by a myriad of factors. While these theories provide potential scenarios, the exact future of the polar vortex remains uncertain. The complexities of the polar vortex and its relationship with climate change make it a challenging area of study, but one of critical importance. As we continue to understand and predict the impacts of climate change, the polar vortex will undoubtedly remain a significant force to reckon with. It's a stark reminder of the intricate and interconnected nature of our planet's climatic systems and the profound impacts our actions can have on them. The future of the polar vortex is uncertain, But one thing is for sure, it will continue to be a significant force on our planet. The polar vortex is more than just a buzzword during the winter season. This icy titan, born in the Arctic, journeys far and wide, bringing with it a bone-chilling cold that affects life in ways more than one. It's not just about bundling up in layers or dealing with a car that won't start. This vortex has profound effects on ecosystems, agriculture, and even our health. But remember, the polar vortex is not an anomaly or a freak of nature. It's a part of our planet's intricate climatic system, a product of the Earth's rotation and temperature differences. And as we move forward with our climate changing, the behavior of the polar vortex could change too. Scientists are working tirelessly to predict its patterns, understand its influences, and mitigate its impacts. Next time, when you feel the chill of winter, remember, it's the polar vortex at play.